Hey everyone, and welcome back. Let's just jump right into this. Today, we're unpacking a really profound, intricately layered essay called A Note About Being Different by Johannes Joseph Antonius Wakin. Now, right off the bat, I need to tell you, this isn't some dry, clinical overview. We're stepping directly into the author's own mind. He actually wrote this piece during highly dissociative periods, using the writing process itself to find focus and meaning in the middle of total turmoil. It's an incredibly raw look at how a human being navigates severe mental fragmentation, the actual biology of fear, and how one person's internal struggle mirrors the very fractures they see out there in modern society.
The author immediately hits us with this powerful reframing, saying, psychotic decompensation is thus a struggle of the mind to survive. This single sentence completely flips the traditional script, doesn't it? I mean, we always hear phrases like psychotic break or mental breakdown, right? But the author is urging us to look at it as the exact opposite. It's not a surrender. It's this profound, desperate fight for survival. And honestly, keeping that reframing in mind is going to be our compass as we navigate the rest of this explainer.
Okay, part 1, the fragmented mind.
To really get a grip on this struggle, we have to start way down at the microscopic level of individual consciousness. The author defines his psychotic decompensation as the mind's active search to reconstruct itself and heal. He uses this really striking phrase, calling it an Alzheimer's of consciousness. Imagine your mind literally losing contact with itself. It's a disintegration disorder. So those psychotic symptoms, they're actually the mind frantically searching for other moments in time where it can grab onto meaning just to continue existing. It's chaotic, sure, but it is fundamentally an active healing mechanism. Because the mind is trying so hard to rebuild itself from this disintegrated state, the author notes it starts using what he calls a four-dimensional butterfly effect. Normally, in our standard three-dimensional perception of time, we learn things chronologically, right? Past, then present, then future. But during this struggle, that whole timeline just breaks down. Parts of the present, the past, and the future all start influencing each other simultaneously. So the author might make choices that seem completely irrational to someone watching in the here and now, but internally, they're calculated moves designed to help him survive in the long run.
And that leads us to this concept of the mind becoming literally splintered across moments in time. The author experiences his own consciousness as these shattered fragments. By picking up these mental splinters, he can stay in regular contact with parts of himself that are scattered across totally different moments of time. Now, yes, it acts as an illusion, but it's an illusion with a vital, life-saving purpose. It keeps him busy, distracted, and most importantly, protected from what he calls the emotionally incomprehensible horror of reality. Think about how you might completely check out or start daydreaming during a highly stressful moment. This is basically that exact same survival mechanism, just amplified to the extreme.
To vividly explain the process of bringing all these scattered shards back together, the author uses this awesome metaphor that a lot of you are definitely going to recognize. He compares it to the T-1000 in the movie Terminator 2. You know that liquid metal Terminator? Just like that character, the scattered, splintered shards of the author's mind have to flow back together and reunite so he can be whole again. And the success of that merging? It depends entirely on how much energy he has in his present moment compared to the size of the trauma shards he's trying to absorb.
Section 2. Trauma and Pseudo-Reality.
So if the mind is splintering to protect itself, we naturally have to ask, what exactly is it protecting itself from? For the author, the root cause is deeply unprocessed trauma that spans more than 2 decades. And he attributes this to a severe lack of timely, adequate help from healthcare providers and his surrounding environment. He describes creating a mathematically complex form of a prison. But here's the catch. This isn't a prison to keep the outside world out. It's a pseudo-reality specifically designed to trap his own unmanageable, traumatic experiences inside. It acts as a shield, preventing him from being constantly triggered by a reality that he just finds too horrific to bear without it.
Let's move into Section 3, the endocannabinoid system.
What's really fascinating here is that the essay doesn't just stay in the realm of psychology or cool metaphors, it dives deep into actual human biology. The author heavily suspects that his psychological splintering is physically rooted in a runaway biological system that got triggered by intense, life-threatening fear. We're talking about the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS. It's this massive neuromodulatory network in our bodies. It's made up of receptors, primarily CB1, which are abundant in the brain, and CB2, which are found in the immune system. Then you have the endocannabinoids themselves, which our bodies produce naturally, and finally, the enzymes that synthesize and break those down. It's a highly complex, widespread system.
And the ECS does a ton of heavy lifting for us. It influences the development of the central nervous system, it controls synaptic plasticity for learning and memory, it manages our biological response to injuries or insults, and it maintains our body's homeostasis, basically keeping us balanced. The author's main thesis here is that a deeply ingrained death fear effectively hijacked his ECS. His system just became completely overloaded trying to manage this constant, unrelenting state of threat. And that created a massive energy deficit in his brain, which ultimately caused the modulation of his entire nervous system to fail.
All right, Section 4, Societal Complexity and Distrust.
Having looked at the microscopic level of biology and individual trauma, the author does something brilliant. He zooms way out to the macro level. He literally takes his internal biological distress and scales it up to critique civilization itself. So on one side, you have the individual mind, right? Building a complex mathematical prison to shield itself from trauma. But on the other side, you have macro society. The author argues that societal structures respond to anomalies by becoming increasingly centralist and complex. They're essentially building their own structural prison to shield themselves from individuals who don't perfectly fit the mold. Both the individual and the society are relying on hypercomplexity to try and manage their underlying fears.
And this brings up a truly pivotal question that the author wrestles with. What happens when society splinters? I mean, if an individual mind can fragment due to unmanageable trauma and complexity, can an entire society undergo a macro-level psychotic decompensation? The author believes that systemic misunderstanding and a total lack of empathy are the exact catalysts that would cause our society's downfall.
Which takes us right into Section 5, Technology and the Collective.
The essay outlines several very specific fears regarding these macrostructures. In the author's view, increased societal complexity inevitably leads to centralization and a loss of true democratic organization. He points specifically to artificial intelligence, arguing that because AI is trained on the masses, it naturally relies on confirmation bias. He worries it will generate false positives that punish differently thinking individuals. Furthermore, he looks at socialist policies and the merging of sovereign nation-states into collectives, like the European Union, viewing them as potential pathways to corruption, dictatorship, and the erasure of individual moral freedom. These are very real structural fears, drawn directly from his own internal experience of feeling targeted and deeply misunderstood by complex, overarching systems.
Looking at this massive push toward a technologically integrated collective, the author stops and asks this deeply profound question. Are humans actually capable of thinking, or does our DNA think for us? He's genuinely wondering if our drive to build these massive, centralized, resource-consuming societies is simply a biological mandate hardwired into us to survive as a species. And if so, does that biological mandate completely overshadow our actual ability to communicate, to connect spiritually, or to exercise true free will? It's heavy stuff.
Finally, Section 6, Retreating to the Self.
Faced with a macro world that feels unmanageably complex, deceptive, and completely untrustworthy, the author makes a definitive, hard-line choice. He states simply, "My body is my church." With a profound lack of trust in healthcare, in the government, in societal collectives, and in technology, he just retreats inward. He seeks sanctuary far away from the institutions of the world, returning to the absolute only thing he knows best, his own body, his mind, and his soul. It's a quiet, radical act of reclaiming ownership over his own existence, even if that existence feels agonizingly fragmented.
And he leaves us with this final, lingering thought. As he struggles to pull the splintered shards of his consciousness together just to survive one-dimensionally in this reality, he asks, how do we survive zero-dimensionally as well as multidimensionally? It's a question that asks us to examine the very fabric of our reality, the nature of our trauma, and the complex prisons we build for ourselves, both inside our own minds and out there in the world. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.